And all of a sudden, as I was reading these words and taking them in and writing, all of a sudden, I realized that there was a direct beam of sunlight shining on the literal pages that I was reading and writing on. And y'all, my eyes, they just welled up with tears, and I felt like God was just giving me the biggest hug. Hi, friend. I'm Susan Beth, and you are listening to the She Is podcast, where we talk about living life intentionally and about trusting that the desires you have deep within you are there for a reason. I believe that the creator of the universe put those desires within you and that they are pathways to your purpose. My desire is that this would be a space that encourages you to lean in and to hear the whispers of the divine, and that you would be reminded of things that I honestly believe you already know. That you, my friend, are here for a reason. So if you're here for more conversations in that kind of space, welcome. Let's go. Hey, happy Sunday or start of a new week, whenever you might happen to be listening to this episode. But this week, we're talking about transitions and trust. And the natural transition from summer to autumn, it seems to hold more tension than other seasonal transitions. And in the Autumn Journal's weekly focus, I talk about how you can almost feel it in the atmosphere. You know, this push and pull of control between the heat of summer and then the milder temperatures, depending on where you live, that the season of autumn can bring. And transitions in our life, they can have a similar tension to them. You know, maybe we aren't experiencing change as quickly as we hoped for, and it's easy to feel stuck in a season that we are just so ready to be out of. And we can't control the physical seasons, but what we can control is where we will place our trust and how we will choose to walk through the seasons of our life. One of the journal prompts for this week, it asks the question, is trusting God with your season hard? If your answer to that question is a quick, resounding yes, please don't beat yourself up. You know, trust is a hard thing for us for many reasons, especially when we feel trust has been broken. When trust has been broken, it can bleed into every other relationship in our life, including our relationship with God. Trust issues affect the openness of our hearts, and it's a tricky place to live when you are guarding your heart so securely. You might have noticed that I oftentimes say this phrase, or when I'm offering up a prayer for us, I will invite you to open up your heart. And I am speaking that out because I want to be intentional about having an open heart to receive all that God has for me. And sometimes we might not even be aware that our heart is closed. You know, sometimes we have closed our heart out of hurt or protection. And we aren't even aware that because we've done that, then we have that same posture with God. And our spirits, they long for intimacy and connection with our Creator. And we don't even realize that we've built up and we've put up walls that are keeping us from the very thing that we long for. So we have to be aware and make sure that we are not approaching our relationship with God according to the limitations of our relationships with others. And, you know, that might sound ridiculous to you that I would even consider, you know, you relating to God as you would in other relationships. But I think we do that, you know, a lot of times unaware that we're even doing it. We don't even realize it because we so many times act and respond out of habit. And so we respond to God sometimes as if He's the one who has hurt us or broken our trust. And you know what? Maybe you feel like he has. And if that is you and you feel that way, just be honest about it. He can handle your hurt. And I know that because I've been there. And my anger and doubt wasn't met with a hard hand of judgment from God. Instead, it was met with a loving embrace of a father that loved me through that season. And that hard season, it forever changed my relationship with God, because it was in that season that I experienced his unconditional love. And perfect love, it changes us to our core. Now, have I experienced moments of anger and doubt since that season? For sure. But the one thing that is different now is the trust factor. I trust him. I trust him even when I'm hurt and I'm disappointed and even when I'm devastated. I trust him because I believe that even when something doesn't make sense to my human mind or my heart, I trust his love and his faithfulness and his goodness towards me. His ways are higher than my ways, and I rarely see it in the moment or the season, but he has proven time and time again that he truly is giving me the desires of my heart that I think in a particular moment will look different than what I'm actually seeing and experiencing. Transitions and trust have been a theme for many of us the past several years. Lots of change in the world, and it's impacted, each of us, it's impacted our individual lives, and lots of positive things have risen up out of a lot of not so positive circumstances. We all have been given the opportunity to find out and appreciate what ultimately matters in our lives. And my life has experienced major transition in the last few years as well. One of those transitions involved us physically moving to another part of the city to be closer to a business and a new project that didn't end up happening, yet had me stuck in that particular area because of a lease. So I would find myself frequently vacillating between frustration and trust, as I was frustrated, no longer being close physically to many of my kids. And yet there was this feeling of being held by underlying trust. And I've mentioned many times here on the podcast and in writings how my early morning walks at sunrise the past several years have just become an important and such a life-giving rhythm for me. And as eager as I've been to move closer to downtown again, I recognized that I was feeling some apprehension as where I had been living had just such beautiful, unobstructed views of sunrise and sunsets. And I'm going to share something that's pretty raw and real time for me that I actually shared with my family last week, the morning that it happened. We recently moved, and I feel like I should say we are still moving because I'm still surrounded by boxes. But, and I feel like if you've ever moved, the vortex that you enter. It's like you think things are going better than you expected with the move, and everything is moving along. And then it's like these last remaining items start multiplying, and you feel like you've entered this time warp where you are boxing things up and loading them up, and time is passing strangely. It just feels weird. And yet random items are just still needing to be boxed, and it just seems like it's never going to end. And life just is kind of a blur for a few days. So we lived in that for a few days, and needless to say, we were exhausted in every way. And I think it was the second morning here at the new house, because the first night was just us basically getting things in and then collapsing. So I think it was the second morning that I found myself alone in the house. And I had the thought before I jumped into any unpacking or doing anything else that I wanted to grab my journal and just take some time to get still and to write because it had been a few days since I'd had a regular morning. So I got some coffee and was just going to chill for a little bit. And I'd already been outside that morning as I had the previous day at sunrise and was walking and just trying to find a great view of the sun coming up. And even the timing was a little different. So I was just trying to figure all that out. So I was inside the house and I decided to open up the back door and just allow the natural light in. And I plopped down on the couch with my Bible and journal. And I decided to open up to the weekly focus and the autumn journal. And the words that I was reading on the page, they just felt very timely as I was reading, words about the season inviting us home and reminding us that change is exciting and beautiful and needed for future growth. And all of a sudden, as I was reading these words and taking them in and writing, all of a sudden, I realized that there was a direct beam of sunlight shining on the literal pages that I was reading and writing on. And y'all, my eyes, they just welled up with tears, and I felt like God was just giving me the biggest hug and reminding me that wherever I am, He is there. Now, you might hear that and you might think, okay, you're a little dramatic, Susan. And, that's fine. Although if you're here listening to this podcast, then I'm assuming that you're okay with how I am or you're just amused by it. And that's why you show up. But either way, the point that I want you to hear in that is God will meet you where you are. He made you the way that you are, and He will show up and He will speak to you in a way that speaks to your soul. Because that moment was so powerful for me and one that I will never forget. And those moments are why I can't stop encouraging and inviting you to getting still and to opening up your heart and your eyes to the power and the presence of God in your life. You guys, God is not someone for us to only read about and to hear sermons about, but our God, He wants to be in an intimate relationship with us, communicating with us in and out of our everyday moments. Do you realize that the people that we sit and we hear sermons about in the Bible, they were experiencing God? The stories we're hearing, there were stories about them experiencing God out on the land while they were working or walking. They were walking down the street while they were living their everyday, ordinary life. So I don't know if you are just coming out of a season of transition or if you are smack dab in the middle of a transition. Wherever you are, I want to remind you today that He is right there with you. And I will end today with reading a verse that's on the weekly focus page this week. And it's Proverbs 3, 5, and 6. It says, trust God from the bottom of your heart. Don't try to figure out everything on your own. Listen for God's voice in everything that you do. Everywhere that you go, He's the one who will keep you on track. I love you guys, and I hope you have a wonderful week, and we'll talk soon. Hey, you. Thanks for listening. And if you would like to connect more, head over to SusanBeth.com and sign up, and you will be one of the first to find out about anything new. Plus, there's a special free download available just to say thanks. If something in this episode did speak to you, would you do me a favor and share it with a friend that you think it might resonate with as well? And until next time, keep showing up in the world just as God purposed you to do, because you being you is exactly what we all need.
A production of Amplify Life Media.